Top 10 Cold War Research Topics. The Civil War and the Cold War. Several significant events in American history shaped the country, leading to its present state today. The Civil War and the Cold War were two crucial stepping stones that have proved that people's views very much depend on the time and place, and sometimes, a difference in opinions causes a major conflict. In your paper, you could compare these two events and their impacts on American society. The Cold War and its effects on American policies. The end of the Second World War led to the rise of two major global powers, the USA and the USSR. The two nations had conflicting political and economic ideologies. While America's economic and political system was capitalistic and liberal, the Soviet Union gave little room for private enterprises to thrive. How did the Cold War influence U.S. governmental foreign and domestic policies? Explore this issue in an essay. The Cold War and Decolonization History. The Cold War and decolonization were two events of global significance, and while each happened independently, they eventually overlapped in time. The Cold War did not lead to decolonization, however, the policies pursued by the United States incited the retreat of the European powers from their colonies throughout the world. Why and how did that happen? We recommend you explore these questions. Winston Churchill's speech and the Cold War. The Sinews of Peace, known as the Iron Curtain, is the speech of Winston Churchill that laid the accent on the challenges of the Western world. The speech of the British statesman outlined the onset of the Cold War. It opened people's eyes and made them realize that they were involved in the new phase of the conflict. In your paper, you could evaluate the primary objectives of the speech. The Cold War, international relations between 1945 and 1989. One of the major historical events that shaped international relations between 1945 and 1989 was the Cold War. It was a war of ideologies and propaganda. The United States of America advanced the capitalist ideology, whereas the Soviet Union, USSR, was for communism. How does the Cold War enhance our understanding of international relations? This question is worth focusing on. Popular culture and the Cold War. The Cold War greatly influenced popular culture worldwide. Both the US and the USSR recognized the power of media and culture in shaping public opinion. In the United States, popular culture during the Cold War often reflected a sense of patriotism and anti-communist sentiment. The Soviet Union, in turn, restricted popular culture, using media and arts to propagate communist ideals. In your paper, you can compare these two approaches. The Voice of America during the Cold War. The Voice of America, VOA, was a radio station founded in 1942 and aimed primarily at audiences from Eastern Europe and the Soviet bloc. Its main goal was to fight Soviet propaganda and present an alternative point of view. At the same time, its critics noted the tendency of the media to cover events one-sidedly. What role did the VOA play in overthrowing governments in the communist bloc countries? We recommend that you focus on this topic. The Vietnam War and the Cold War. The tension between the Western Bloc and the Eastern Bloc made the developing nations the perfect sites for enhancing the interests of the two sides. Thus, the Vietnam War was escalated by the assumption that the communist movement would spread out to the Southeast region. What were the key causes and consequences of the Vietnam War? This is an exciting research topic. The Cold War, Reasons and Lessons. The Cold War, a period of intense geopolitical tension between the United States and the Soviet Union, was caused by numerous factors. Some of them are ideological conflict, competition for resources, and geopolitical ambitions of both sides. What were the lessons of the Cold War, and can it happen again? What if the Cold War ended in a direct clash of nuclear powers? This topic has become relevant again after the events of 2022. The Cold War in the 1950s. The 1950s was a critical period of the Cold War as tensions escalated between the United States and the Soviet Union. Numerous proxy conflicts, such as the Korean War and the Vietnam War, characterized this period. At the same time, despite the geopolitical contradictions, there was an active cultural exchange between the USSR and the USA. What other features of relations between the two superpowers were in the 1950s? Explore in your essay. Find more research topics on studycorgi.com.